Hi, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the bSUKI UK&I Assemble 3 event. We do have a jam-packed session today, so I'm not going to keep you too long. I'm just going to do the introduction, what we can expect in this session, and then hand you straight over to our next speaker, Peter. Just as in terms of a quick update, we'll go through some thoughts about what the industry is doing in various different groups and how they relate to one another, and a bit of an explanation into what the rooms are. Then we have Peter doing the case study on the HS2 Euston Tunnel. Then we have a technical update from Nick Nisbet on infra-air and the IFC 4x3. Then we have something new, which I hope will continue in all of these Assemble events, is room updates. So we now have in the UK room coordinators, and they'll be going through giving a very brief update as to the work that's gone on since the last Assemble event in each of those rooms. Then finally, Emma's going to finish up with some panel questions. So if anyone does have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat, and Emma will keep track of those and run through those at the end. Just a quick reminder of the bSUKI 4 Vs, what we're intending to be and what we're trying to be, and it's already working out that way, so it's quite good. We are trying to be vast, vibrant, vital, and valuable, with all of these things under here in terms of what we're trying to do. And I think I'm really quite proud of how we've developed since the first Assemble event and how much work we're engaged in across the industry and across the sectors to really start to push what and communicate what the UK and Ireland industry is looking for from OpenBIM and IFC and the other standards. A bit of a brief conversation about whether we're all aligned, and when I say all, I mean us as buildingSMART UK and Ireland and various other organisations or companies that are doing various different things in the digital transformation space within our industry. Obviously, you know, buildingSMART UK and Ireland, that's what we're all here for. At the first Assemble events, we discussed how we are one and the same organisation as part of UK BIM Alliance under the Syria umbrella. And there are people that overlap into those groups. So there are similar people in the UK BIM Alliance as within buildingSMART UK and Ireland. Then we've got the Centre for Digital Built Britain, CDBB. Many people in the industry, if they're new to this topic and this discussion, will see that there are lots of different things going on out there in social media, talking about how the industry is developing, where they're going, what the next best thing is. The National Digital Twin Programme, all of those things. And there are, hopefully this helps to communicate that to the industry, there are common people, common themes, common topics that are all discussed within both the CDBB and UK BIM Alliance and with all three organisations. Then we move on to something that I think we mentioned last time very briefly, is the BIM Interoperability Expert Group. Again, this is something that's funded by the government via the Construction Innovation Hub with involvement from the BIM Alliance and bSUKI. And there are, again, similar people or different people that are representing the BIM Interoperability Expert Group, which are creating the advice and the recommendations for UK government. Added to that, we have the British Standards Institute, not necessarily looking at volunteer work, but they are very much an organisation there responsible for publishing the standards and advice and guidance, also undertaking some work on behalf of CDBB. And obviously part of the tripartite agreement between the UK BIM Alliance, CDBB and BSI for the UK BIM framework. And then finally, we have the ISO convener panel, and they are really, it's looking at taking all the standards that we had originally from the British Standard and PAS 1192 suite and transitioning those across to international standards. And I think there are lots of personalities in each of these organisations, but the one person that we've got that seems to cross all of those is Anne Kemp, Superwoman, as I'll call her. So it's a list of what the abbreviations mean there, but we do have lots of other personalities that overlap in all of those. And I have said in other meetings and discussions that I'm going to do this big Venn diagram to show who the people are that represent those things, but this is a very much simplified version of that. So hopefully what this does is communicate to people that this is very much a joined up thinking. Each of the organizations are learning about what the others are doing and what their opinions and what their direction and what their focus is. So we are very much talking to one another. It shouldn't be seen as, oh, CDBB are this and UK BIM Alliance are that. We are very much talking about the same things, trying to reach the same aims and not stepping on one another's toes too much. So hopefully that will be communicated a little bit further, and it will be, as Pam's just tweeted, starting the conversation about how these organisations overlap and what they're looking at. But look out for that in the future. So as with all of these Assemble sessions before, we have always asked for other people. This is the current list of people. I'm going to run out of space on one slide at some point, but really proud to see that the committee for BuildingSMART UK and Ireland is growing, and it's purely through people approaching us and saying, I'd like to be involved, what can I do? We do ask all these times. We're waiting for help. We're absolutely accepting of anyone's volunteer time, help, experience. We do particularly, as you'll see in a minute, need some sort of representation from airports. So if anyone knows of anyone related to airport work and engineering and development and asset management, then please let us know, because we'd love to have them involved. Room activities. We will get an update in a little while from all the people involved in rooms, but this is the extract from the BuildingSMART International website, just so you can understand what rooms are. Essentially, they are groups of sector specialists who look to improve the built environment through developing open solutions and standards. Rooms are open, regardless of membership in BuildingSMART or a local chapter. And they basically run through ideas, conversations, discussions in open forums, sometimes at the BuildingSMART International conference. But the upshot of those is that they end up being projects created. And those projects operate in accordance with the strict BuildingSMART standards. So there's a flow and project process that each of those go through in terms of approval, voting amongst the global chapters. It's all very well strictly controlled. And ultimately, the output of some of those projects become embedded in standards. They become extensions to the IFC schema. There are lots of different ways to help the industry, but they really have been driven from a specific sector. So we do have the airport room, building room, construction room, infra room, product room, railway room, regulatory room, and the technical room. And one of the things we've done recently within the committee is to align or assign coordinators to each of those rooms. So I'm not going to go through all the names on here, but it's suffice to say we do have a few gaps. So we're going to run through after Peter and Nick's presentations an update on all of those rooms, and you'll start to hear from the people involved in doing those things. It's very much not the fact that these people are the experts in these areas. They are looking for engagement from industry, from those specific sectors, to help and to contribute and input into those rooms. But these are the people who are coordinating that effort, and we'll be reaching out to various different industry groups at the right time. As you can see, as I mentioned earlier, the airport room is currently lacking a coordinator with any specific experience in airports, but we will assign someone internally within the committee if we can't find anyone new to join us. So with that, I'll hand over to Peter, who's going to give us a case study on the HS2 Euston Tunnel.
Thanks, Casey. Hi there, everyone. Just going to share my screen. Hopefully this works. Can everyone hear me okay? Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Silence. Right, so
we can hear you, Peter.
Excellent, thank you, Emma. So hi there, everyone. My name's Peter Ruff. So I work as the head of BIM and digital on SCS Railways, and at the moment we're working on one of the lots on HS2. And I think it was Dave basically asked me to maybe do a presentation to the group, show you what we've been getting up to on one of these big mega projects. And I saw a few weeks ago, there was a great presentation by Jason, I think it was, from Bylaw on Hinckley, and that kind of inspired me to do this presentation. So yeah, so today I think we've got about 20-25 minutes and then some questions afterwards, I think. And it's going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour. It's a bit of an overview over maybe the last, I've been on a project for about 5 years now. So obviously can't show you everything, unfortunately, but hopefully give you a good overview of what we've been getting up to, some interesting stuff, hopefully. And yeah, so basically a bit of an agenda going through, you know, our strategy, what sort of services we're providing. We've talked a lot about use of the IFC format and especially the data and how that's influencing lots of our processes on the project. And we'll also then go into some of the benefits that we've seen as well. So start on this one here. Sorry, hope you can see that. So what is High Speed 2? So obviously it's a pretty big project. You might have already read about it in the news. It's it's in the news a lot, it seems. And essentially what it is, it's a new high-speed line, HS2, because we already have HS1, which is basically going over to France on the Eurostar. And the idea is it will triple the number of peak hour seats from Euston, with trains running at up to about 250 miles an hour, which would be the fastest in Europe. So you can see here right on the map. So basically, obviously, it's a big project. It's split up into actually 2 phases. So phase 1 is this dark blue between London, Euston, up until about Birmingham. And then you have phase 2A, which goes up to Crewe, and then phase 2B, which goes over to Manchester and Leeds. So that's the Y. And the idea is it's going to link up 8 of 10 of Britain's largest cities and support over 100,000 new jobs. And the cost has been, let's say, controversial to say the least. And at the moment, it's an estimated cost of 104 billion for all of these works, which obviously is a lot of money. And when it's all done, it'll be Europe's largest construction project ever. So you might have seen in the news recently that obviously projects were officially awarded back in, I think it was March now. And we've been cracking on with construction after about 3 years of pre-con and design. So as I mentioned, we're just working at the moment on this phase 1, and here are some sort of some numbers maybe to understand sort of the scope of it. So it's about 230 kilometers long. There's 46 kilometers of tunnels overall, 74 kilometers of tunnel of cutting. Sorry, there'll be 128 million tons of excavated material, which is a huge sum, and a few other nearly 300 satellite compounds. Okay. So yeah, it's a mega project in every sense of the word. So who are we? So we represent a joint venture, which is between Skanska, Costain and Strabag. So obviously all contractors who've worked in the infrastructure space for quite a long time. And then we also have our design house, which is another JV of Arup, Tipsa in Spain, and Zublin, who are basically the design house of Strabag. And so that represents at the moment, and those are just those 6 companies. Obviously now we have our much extended supply chain as well. But just with those 6 companies, we have over 1,400 FTEs at the moment, which is split over probably about 40 project offices. The parent companies represent 4 countries, and we probably have about 80 nationalities represented as well. And with the COVID situation, we probably have quite a lot of people now, probably spread across the globe, working on this project. So I suppose when you start working on these big international projects, stuff like BIM and data standards can actually really help you to, I suppose, to communicate with so many different people and nationalities and cultures. So yeah, I mean, HS2 obviously had very high expectations of, let's say, digital on this project. So during the tender, we actually had this little picture which they presented up on the wall to kind of inspire us, if you like. And you can see here it's kind of a funky graphic which shows you this kind of digital bridge, which shows you the way to, you know, that we want to be working. And down here you see the old ways, and there's risk down here. We were going the dark path of delay. So yeah, it's an interest. We quite like that. We thought it was a nice way of presenting something. And here's their strap line, which is in the bottom right here. So it's got, you know, some of the buzzwords that we use, but essentially we kind of boiled it down to, we want to utilize BIM to increase productivity, reduce waste, and leave a legacy. So specifically on this project, because of its size, we're probably running it more like you might do as a company. So we actually came up with some high-level strategies that we would like to achieve on this project, hopefully aligned with what our parent companies want and what the UK government, I suppose, are requesting as well. So we've just distilled it down into 4 to make it a bit easier for ourselves that we target, we benchmark ourselves against and we measure against. So one is trying to influence the industry, I guess, with hopefully some best ways. It's why we kind of, obviously like going out and doing these kind of events, try and get the word out there, see if there's interesting stuff that we can help with or influence. And then the other one's about saving money, I guess. So we put on a pretty, I think, hopefully a realistic expectation of a 1% minimum saving on capex with a 2% target using these digital methods, and a prediction of the OPEX savings. It's pretty hard for us to do that, but we're asking HS2 to help us with that, where we would like to get between 5 and 10. Again, maybe not the highest, but we think they're quite realistic. And obviously, when you're dealing with billions, 1% is actually quite a lot of money. And then the final one is upskilling of Digital Built Britain. So obviously, a lot of what we do is about training people. That's probably one of the biggest challenges that we have. So we put a metric on that as well. We would like to train up our own staff, and especially the supply chain as well. So this strategy helps us to kind of, rally around something and, trying to aspire to be better, I guess. So hopefully this will work. Here we go. So here, if this holds through, we produce this kind of, this shows you what we're actually building. So we're responsible for about the first 26 kilometers of the route. It's mostly in central London, so it just comes out of Euston up to about the M25, and yeah, here's just some facts down there. So we've got about 20 kilometers of tunnels. That's a mixture of twin board and SCL. We've actually got 7 TBMs, which obviously is a large amount. We've got 7 shafts, 2 portals, 5 bridges, and about 5 kilometers of earthworks. I suppose one of the other challenges we have is because we're going through central London, we've got lots of interfaces, not just with the other HS2 contracts. We're kind of part of a big ecosystem, if you like, with rail systems and the stations, for example. But obviously, we're interfacing with Network Rail, London Underground, TfL, the councils, and a lot of utility companies as well. And in terms of what do we mean by digital, with this is kind of our product offering here on the left. So obviously, maybe the term BIM can be, widely used. So we offer those kind of more traditional, like 3D, 4D, 5D, and 6D services, if you like, looking after, CDEs and asset information. We also have got really good GIS team. We won't go into too much of that today, but that's really, really helpful to us, especially in a big linear infrastructure project. And then we've been investing quite a lot of time and effort into these data services, which I'll hopefully be able to show you a bit later, which is, how we manage databases and analytics and stuff like that. And then also the cool stuff like VR, AR, and also mobile technology. And I guess it's a big project, it's a big team, as you've seen, and all of these different services basically can assist all of these different teams that we have on the project. So maybe when we think about BIM, we might think it's affecting design and construction, but for example, maybe not so much about quality in the field or project controls, for example. So I suppose it's just trying to represent, it's a global effort, and hopefully we can influence and help all these other teams achieve their goals. So as I mentioned, I've been personally on this project for a long time, and we produced this kind of video as part of our tender response. That was probably about 4 years ago now. And if anyone's been involved in a tender, where we were quite lucky, we were actually able to test quite a lot of what we wanted to do during that tender process. And then we've been able to kind of learn some of those lessons through 8 months of tendering, essentially, and deploying them on the job. And I think that was a really useful time for us to learn, I guess, in a kind of a controlled environment. So what I'll show you a bit later is kind of just an extension of what we trialed back then, actually. So hopefully here you can see it was kind of a joint effort with lots of different team members being part of this, and we tried to get a good one team mentality during that tender. And then I suppose from my point of view, what was maybe most impressive, we actually carried out 4 days of lessons learned afterwards, which was tiring and time consuming, but it basically we worked out what we wanted to do before we got into contract with HS2, and we were able to execute that before we started officially. So it gave us a bit of a jump start, and that was really, really helpful to us. Just a bit here about what kind of systems we use. So this is entitled to the slide "Building the Machine," because to be honest, when we were in project delivery, that's exactly how it feels. We're building basically a machine, or digital machine, if you like, to deliver the project. So just in terms of authoring tools, because it is a rail project, we are using quite a lot of Bentley tools. I mean, they are pretty standard, I think, due to the people using Power Rail Track for the alignments and stuff like that. So we have kind of aligned ourselves a lot with that. But obviously, we've been using the IFC format to drive a lot of our downstream processes. And I suppose that's kind of maybe a bit unique. Not sure if so many other people are doing that. We use a lot of basically configured information, if you like, which is housed within our CDE, to make sure that all of this information produced using these tools is very consistent. I'll explain a little bit about that later. And then we also use a lot of this product called FME, which is an ETL tool. That's extract, transform, load tool, and it's a super useful tool for doing clever stuff with data or geometry. So I don't know if people are too aware of it, but we use it a lot on the project, and we've seen many, many benefits. You can see some amazing cool stuff with it. So definitely recommend everyone try that out if you haven't. It's a great product. We have our sort of collaboration software here that we use. We try to make as much cloud-based as possible. Not all of it is, unfortunately. Obviously using Celebri for some of our IFC tasks. And that's all basically stored under our part of what we call the CDE. We use ProjectWise for a lot of storing of our graphical information. It's a really good tool for that. We're using Synchro for our 4D kind of modeling, and we use CostOS for our 5D. So again, these two products are pretty well established on the market, pretty well best in class, I would say. And then we've actually, I'll show you hopefully a bit later about this. We've managed to kind of change the way that we store a lot of this structured data now. So we house these big SQL databases basically on Azure, and then we're using quite a lot of Power BI, which we love as a kind of a business intelligence tool for this project to analyze that. I'll show you a bit about that later. And then we have kind of a suite of mobile technology for the field as well. And as I said, yeah, I mean, IFC information and the structured data basically gets passed around these different systems. So we have our final product basically, which is ready to eat. And we spend a lot of time trying to configure all these systems and make them talk and work together, and it runs pretty smoothly. And that's why hopefully it runs like a bit like a machine. So yeah, I'll be able to explain a bit more about each one of these processes now. Cool. So just a quick slide. When we were setting up the job, obviously worked quite a lot with our IT team and data architects and systems architects. And if you want to really align structures to do effective reporting or integration, you really need to configure many systems so that they have common structures. So we spent a lot of time at the beginning of the job actually as a group trying to come up with common, as I said, those common data structures. So, and it's not just about design or engineering. It might be about commercial, or your document management tool, or your timesheet management tool, or the way you do your accounting and stuff like that. So won't go into too much detail about it, but we spent a lot of time as a group kind of going outside maybe your traditional BIM sphere, if you like, so that we could make sure that when we would try to integrate with other systems, that was effective later. So for example, that's your estimating system or your P6 for your program as well. So yeah, I mean, that's a complicated piece of work, but definitely worthwhile that we found. Okay, so I mean, then when you start off a job, it's not all looks great. It's quite boring at the beginning. So I mean, HS2s, they just had their standard EIR like you would expect. That probably was one of the most onerous or challenging set of requirements that I've ever witnessed. Been working in the industry for quite a few years now on big other blue chip clients, and HS2's requirements certainly are very, as I said, challenging. That's why we've had to, you know, develop all of these things and do all of these things, because that's what they asked for as well. Obviously, then, you know, wrap that up in our in one of our several bets that we have. I mean, this one is interesting. We actually did this as a joint effort with our design house, because we thought that was a bit more effective in working like that. We kind of worked out this kind of through the MPDTs, this kind of very structured approach, which we kind of implemented on these other systems that I mentioned before, where we moved from our assets down to our model items, down to our elements as well. And what we did then, which is maybe coming into the fore in rail a little bit more, but maybe wasn't so common before, and that's creating our component library. So again, those sort of Revit users or people working oil and gas are very used to this, maybe not so much in some other linear infrastructure, but we realized that if you wanted to have very consistent information, you couldn't just let people run amok basically. So yeah, we configured basically a library of parts, if you like, or specific components, which we could then control that information really consistently, essentially. You know, and then we did the standard things about the LOGD, and we also came up with this extra attributes that we knew that we would need for downstream processes as part of an extended LOMI, and we use the extended property schema basically on the IFC. So that basically, so we control this schema in our own systems, and that basically gets burned in as another table in the IFC schema. And these essentially allow us to do some extra linking, and it's to do with the HS2 requirements as well. So that's been helpful to us as well. Then that was kind of like wrapped up in some guidelines. It's like a manual, if you like, to make sure you're doing things in the right way. The design house did that, which is great. And yeah, I mean, essentially it ensures consistency, and that's really the key word for us. If you want to automate anything, then your data needs to be consistent, and maybe historically it hasn't been, and that's why we've all struggled maybe to do some of these more interesting things that we can do. So, you know, hopefully that allows us to have a, you know, nice looking model. That looks great, but obviously it's full of, you know, really useful information that's useful for the teams. And this information is really what's driving a lot of our processes, and this is what's useful. The graphical, you know, it has its own certain life cycle, but we've realized that the kind of that information is really what's valuable here. So we spent a lot of time basically making sure that this data was correct, essentially. Cool. So just a little bit about, so we've been using 4D throughout the years to kind of virtually construct or plan our works. Won't go too much into this. I'm sure people have seen this before. So yeah, I mean, essentially what we're doing here is just linking up our program with the models, and essentially that's simulating the plan. Basically, you can definitely plan your works, especially on these massive assets, a little bit more effectively. And obviously you can do your testing in the virtual environment rather than on site. So I mean, yeah, I mean, we've been using this technique for a few years and definitely found lots of clashes, which we probably wouldn't have found before. So, you know, you can manage that out way before that we've hit site. I mean, and that's been really helpful. One of the interesting things, I guess, or things that we've been focusing on that might not happen on some other projects, is to do with these dig sequences and excavation. So funnily enough, excavation is a massive deal for us, obviously being a big tunneling and geotechnical project. There's a lot of money and time in those excavations, so that kind of like, we do quite a lot of quant takeoffs and analysis using those items linked to the program to understand the logistics of how we're trying to move away muck and stuff like that. So yeah, I won't go too much more into that. I'm sure you've seen this before, but yeah, we found it very useful. Here's just another one that we've been doing. This is around the Euston area, and this shows maybe about a kilometre's worth of works. There's a road diversion. We're building a big portal as well on the left-hand side. There's some SCL as well, and this was helpful for getting the teams talking to each other, I guess. We have different, let's say, structures owned by different teams that don't often talk to each other. These sort of like techniques help everyone to kind of come together and collaborate a little bit more effectively. And I suppose, interestingly for me, we've also been using these animations, if you like, or sequences as part of our community engagement with the local stakeholders. So, you know, there's a lot of people who live around here and they deserve to understand what's going on. And maybe historically, when you've been engaging with maybe non-technical stakeholders, it's not the best quality information. Obviously, these kind of sequences are a lot more easier to understand for a layman, and they're a lot more detailed as well. So hopefully that sort of transparency is a bit more effective, and they've enjoyed, you know, understanding a little bit more about what we're trying to build. Cool. Okay, so moving on. One thing that we trialed out in the tender that we really wanted to focus on is this notion of 5D. And so if you don't know, so 5D is where we're estimating using the models essentially. And it was something that we really wanted, you know, we focused on during the tender, and we focused on heavily during our estimating phase. So I don't know if anyone's been involved with estimating before, but it's an interesting approach, shall we say, how it's done at the moment. And essentially, it's very siloed. And one of the big issues we found is that the impact from other disciplines are not visible, and there's definitely a lack of transparency between different departments that are working. So you have kind of your commercial function, your design function, and your environmental function. And it's, you know, if something changes on one of them, it's a very long and laborious process to change it in the other ones. And, you know, there's lots of reasons for that, but we think one of those reasons is this kind of unstructured data, which is basically feeding all of these different decisions, if you like. So, you know, if we can, you know, we thought maybe if we put kind of this more structured data, which BIM gives us at its core, then it allows these kind of disciplines to talk a bit more effectively to each other. So yeah, so that's hopefully why we tried to do this. So I mean, basically our methodology is we're just using a product which is essentially a database to do all of our takeoffs. The models basically made up about 80% of our direct work scope. And obviously there's still a bit about 2D. You know, we always say, can we do everything from the models? Unfortunately, not at this time, but we thought 80% was a pretty good going actually. And then there's obviously still some allowances for overlap or overbreak and extra stuff like that as well. One of the benefits you get from working in a bit more of a structured environment is you can estimate a bit more effectively to the standards. So we're using CESM 4, and HS2 also have their own cost breakdown structure as well. And interestingly, we had to change the way that we estimated actually. So traditional estimates are done using a trade-based approach. But because we were using models, we actually used a model-based approach essentially, and that allowed for a really standardized bill of quantities actually, which I'll explain later. It was massively much more efficient. So I've just got a little video here, which hopefully you can see some of the processes I just mentioned, and hopefully you can see kind of the speed and the accuracy that we're able to achieve. So you can see here that the IFC file being loaded up. Yeah, and basically, because if you remember earlier, right, we kind of mentioned about how we structured the information using libraries, we were able to script this out essentially, which allowed everything to link together really quickly. If you were trying to do it manually, obviously it would take a bit longer, but because of that consistent information, able to do it a lot faster than again we've historically been able to do. So you see here is picked up, for example, the thicknesses and the grades of concrete and reinforcement ratios, etc., and the types of objects that we're measuring as well. And that's straight out the data inside the models. Can't spell slab, so apparently. And yeah, I mean, and then it basically gives you your full your breakdown and your costs. Now, this is a bit of a cheat I'm showing you here, because although we actually did, we actually proved that we were able to cost directly as well. Our estimating team weren't the happiest about that. So we had to just settle for the automated takeoff, and the estimators actually added the cost. Not going to go into why that happened, but definitely showing you what can be achieved using this. So I mean, and this is really interesting to us. I mean, this is definitely a much more let's say auditable and transparent way of doing this. What was nice actually is when the client asked us to validate the quants, we could able just to send them these files, and that's so much better and much more, as I say, transparent than maybe traditional methods, sending someone a stack of drawings and a few Excel spreadsheets. You can understand really what's going on. And yeah, I mean, it's a much more efficient process. So we reckon it was about 80% faster than the traditional methods. And we did it with about a team of 2 people or 1.5 people rather than a team of 12. So it just shows you one of the kind of transformations that you can achieve. So yeah, really good use case there. And then finally, a kind of an added benefit we found is that we were able to calculate our carbon using this process as well. And essentially the way that worked is we aligned some different data structures. So we've got, let's say, our design, which is in Uniclass. We've got our pricing, which is done in SESM. And then we have our carbon library, which is a bit of a mixture of the HS2 carbon factors and Bath University, I think. And essentially we're able to maybe do a schema map on all of these different structures, which allowed us to push information from, let's say, here down to the carbon quite quickly. And then basically that allowed us to do quite quick carbon analysis. Again, maybe normally it takes quite a lot of time to do that. We were able to pick it up maybe during maybe in about a week, and produce some fancy dashboards and stuff like that. But I suppose the biggest thing was of note was actually we were able to feed back on the design, essentially on our carbon performance, and actually make decisions based upon that, where maybe before you wouldn't have had the time, or it happened a bit too late to do that. So a great example of that is but we were, originally the design was going to have a lot of diaphragm walls. It's pretty traditional construction technique, and one of the reasons we changed to more config piles as they can was to do with the reduction of carbon. I mean, obviously there was a reduction in cost as well, but traditionally if you reduce cost, you reduce carbon. But that was an interesting kind of venture for the team, I guess, maybe something that they hadn't seen before. So yeah, definitely something that we're quite happy with. What we're going to go into now is what we realized is, although we had our let's say models filled with information, we found different techniques, I guess, to analyze them. So essentially we found ways of extracting all of this information, essentially, as I said, storing it on databases where we use a bit of BI tools to help us to analyze it quite quickly on such a big job. I'm just going to quickly show you that because it might be useful to you. So I mean, essentially what this is, I mean, to be honest, it sounds a bit weird, but this is basically just our design, but just presented as structured information. So we have a big database full of all of these objects with attributes, and we just use BI to analyze it quite quickly. This is basically a dashboard about piling on the job. We've got a lot of piles, and here's all our information, and we can slice and dice it. So if I want to see what's in this asset, for example, that will tell me what's there, and it tells me how long all the piles are and the different grades that we've got and reinforcements, etc., and the types. These are our individual objects here. So those are our individual assets. If I clicked on one, then that tells me about that one asset. Although it's blank, apparently, that's good. There we go. So I mean, and obviously that's just for all types of different things. So we do one on concrete. So if we want to find out about what's going on with our D walls, that tells us quite a lot of information there. Steelworks, obviously always quite structured, so that's a good one to do. So we have all of our different types here that we're using. It tells us also our weights and where they're located and stuff like that as well. So this kind of information, as you can see, is we've got a lot of stuff going on, but it's quite quickly to kind of analyze it. We also do stuff like we analyze impacts over time, and we also analyze changes through this. And again, that's just it's just made our life a lot quicker to basically work in this way, using these kind of big structured information. What we're also doing is we also now check the quality you can see this screen as well. So when you start working, basically the model and the information actually is really important to us. So we need to make sure that we're checking its consistency. And essentially, again, we use these kind of BI tools to help us with that. So, we just set up, basically just looks for errors, essentially, in the data. It's very easy for us to kind of find out where the issues are for us. So it allows us to basically manage this quite big job using not a huge team, I guess, because we're able to use the data, I guess, to help us. So yeah, that's something else that we've been doing as well. I'm going to put back to the presentation. So yeah, I mean, just a bit on that. So just a bit on that. Essentially, what that allows us to do is we're able to integrate that data with other systems a little bit more effectively. We can report out of it really quickly, as I said, and that information is used for a multitude of things. I can't name them all, but it's very, very handy for us. So at the moment, what I kind of showed you is a look into what we call our BIM data lake. We called it that because we thought it was a cool word. It's not much else than that. And at the moment, we've got about maybe 120,000 assets, shall we say, or rows of data, and that equals about 12 million data points. So it's a vast data set, but hopefully you could see how we've used Power BI, and you can actually analyze 12 million data points pretty quickly. And that represents about 3,000 model files at the moment, which encompasses our scheme design and our detailed design. So again, it's this kind of macro thinking, but you're able to get a lot of, drill really down into the information, if you like. And I suppose, when you start moving into this way of working, it's a bit different than file-based approach. So for example, we've had to introduce suitability codes and revision codes against the objects, rather than against the files, because we're not so interested in the files anymore. So again, it's maybe a slightly different way of working, but very, very helpful to us. Cool. Maybe a bit of a technical slide here, but for those people who like their architecture, I thought I might include this. So this kind of explains how we actually deal with that information to us on our tables on our Azure platform. And essentially, we actually hold the information in two separate tables. We hold one as like anything which is work in progress, essentially is in a separate table or database actually than the other one. And the other database, essentially, we've created a bunch of static views, and then we farm out those views essentially to our other products or our infrastructure. And the reason for that was maybe a few years ago, we realized that if we had bad quality information in our production area, then it would actually have a massive impact on our other systems. So the idea is we kind of quarantine it, check it in here, and then it moves over into our production one, which then basically feeds all these different programs. And once you start working with structured information, that integration becomes really, really simple. So we were able to integrate with like one of our mobile platforms in about 3 hours, because it's a pretty standard SQL connection. It's very, very simple to do. So again, working in this more structured way opened up a lot of windows for us. Yeah, hopefully that was of use. Just a quick one, I thought I'd mention on something else that we're using the IFC information for. So as I mentioned before, we use a lot of GIS on this project. If you don't know, GIS stands for Geospatial Information Science, and essentially, maps. Essentially, we use it a lot for logistics and utilities and stuff like that. Also, a lot of settlement impact and stuff like that. Environmental data sets as well, and as I mentioned before, lots of utilities on this route as well. And managing third-party information from the likes of TfL and LU. But one thing we have sort of developed ourselves is we call it GeoBIM, which is kind of like mixture of BIM and GIS, if you like. And this uses the IFC files actually. So this uses the latest Esri technology, which enables this 3D GIS, and we were able to come up with a transformer essentially, which converted the IFC file format into something which is can be consumed by Esri, by this product basically. And that's been really helpful for us as well. You're kind of combining the best of both worlds there with a bit of shape files, which are easy to get hold of, and kind of that very detailed BIM information. I mean, we've seen 3D GIS being used in other areas, but maybe not to the level of detail from the IFC files. It tends to be more massing models and stuff like that. So it's something that we're quite happy with. Works quite well. Obviously, you get all the integration, you know, with other services like, you know, live traffic information, etc., which is helpful. And we're able to use this, for example, to analyze, you know, site paths for residents quite effectively using the viewshed tool. And also we were able to work out hazardous material quants for our estimate as well, using some borehole data essentially. So again, I mean, it's just, you know, we're trying to use the IFC files and that data in many ways and shapes as possible to influence us. And yeah, I mean, essentially kind of those IFCD and federated files basically inform our 3D GIS, and we also create the 2D footprints out of them as well. So yeah, hopefully reusing information many times for what we needed to do. Just a little bit about how that works. I won't go into too much detail about it, but essentially it heavily uses FME to cut a long story short. So yeah, definitely a product to have a look at, guys, as well. Just a final one here, I'm going to quickly explain about our mobile solution. So this is our field solution essentially. So when we're going out using tablets and inspecting the works, and basically we created this kind of corny wish list, if you like, which we gave to our suppliers essentially. Say this is what we would like to do, and you can kind of see here on the left that we're using the IFC model essentially as kind of, I suppose, the backbone of what we're trying to build. And we wanted to, you know, make sure that that data basically that we've harvested is reused on site and stuff like that, and then, you know, linked to the check sheets essentially. And yeah, I mean, that's what we've kind of deployed. So this is our mobile technology essentially, and we upload those IFC models. They're linked to the that SQL database that you've seen, which basically draws down that information. And what we're able to do is reuse that information on the forms. So we're able to script a lot of that out. So when you click on something, you don't have to fill in a lot yourself. The idea of that is just to reduce time and errors, I guess. And again, it's a consistent information, so the scripts work really, really well. And yeah, the team's found it really, really helpful. I mean, we've been using it we've been deployed it about 6 months ago. There's lots of work to do with it, lots of extra stuff we can do with it, but it's been working really well. Again, you know, and just saving lots of time for us, and hopefully that information will be a lot more, let's say, consistently structured than we've seen before. So yeah, just a kind of a final slide here on just some of the benefits that we've seen using this. So we were kite marked by BSI through Skanska. That was a few years ago, actually. We've got our sort of, let's say, our data consistency on key fields is up about 99%, which is obviously really, really high, which is great. As I mentioned before, the 5D process, let's say, took about 80% less resource than what you might traditionally expect. Using 4D, the planners reckon they can, you know, plan about 30% faster, if you like. We saved quite a lot of drawings at the beginning of the project. So, I mean, we didn't produce any drawings for about the first 8 months because we didn't need to. So hopefully we've saved quite a few of them. Not enough in my opinion, but there we go. We've also trained about 500 staff as well. And yeah, and luckily enough, we've got a few awards as well. So we were in 2018, we won the Bentley Year in Infrastructure. The 3D GIS I showed you won a map award in Esri, I think in 2019. And then we won 2 awards at the London Construction Awards last year, I think it was, as well. So yeah, hopefully some interesting stuff there, and hopefully some bits and pieces that are of use to everyone. So yeah, that's it. You'll be lucky to hear I'm finished. So that's me, and yeah, thank you very much for your time, guys.
Thank you very much, Peter. I've personally found that really interesting. I hope all of our listeners and viewers that are online are also enjoying that. It's just a great case study so far, just to see how far HS2 have come and you guys have come and added value to that whole process. And I'm sure many people are keen to dive in and do something similar. Just a reminder to everyone on the webinar, if you do have any questions, continue to put them into the chat and we'll deal with them at the panel discussion at the end. But other than that, I'm going to hand over to Nick Nisbet for an update on IFC4 and InfraAir.
Okay, Well, that was a brilliant lead-in to the two things that I want to talk about, if I may. One is IFC 4.3, which is the latest candidate release of the IFC schema, and Infra, which is the proposed project for the UK, for buildingSMART UK and Ireland, to start building on the developments in infrastructure. So first of all, right, let's find a page forward. Yes, sorry. Let me just introduce IFC 4.3. It's been a long time in the making because it's been devoted to or focusing strategically on introducing as much of the infrastructure world as we could into the IFC vocabulary. As you can see, as we've already seen, you don't need to wait. Many people have been using IFC 2x3 very successfully in the infrastructure realm. But we've got the latest release. It's being tested this year, and Marek will say a bit more about it later, so I won't linger too long. But essentially, it brings the world of bridges, roads, rails, ports and waterways, and at early next year, we hope tunnels as well, into the IFC vocabulary. And so we won't have to avert our eyes and see a bridge called IFC building ever again. Commercially, I think we've been adding use cases for the IFC for the infrastructure world and for building world. Capacity planning. I've been working on the ports and harbors, and that's a key feature of any large industrial installation. Maintenance strategies. We've taken a lot of interest in dynamic vehicles and structures. Keys move, vehicles move. And of course, one of the key things about infrastructure is that it's a very strong interaction between the vehicles and the built environment. So we've been adding that. And of course, earthworks and what we've called coursing, which is not a great word, but the build-up of material layers to make the ground are all use cases that we can now model extremely well. And to back that up, we've got a spatial hierarchy that doesn't use building terms, but talks about roads or bridges or facilities. We're putting a lot of work into alignment curves, which are controversial, which is the interesting thing, that between road and rail, there is not unanimity about how alignment should be represented. So we've had to work very hard, and in fact, there's a revision being made to IFC 4.3 just to enhance the ability to represent more rail alignment curves and cants and so on. We've also incorporated geotechnical information, and that's meant that we've had to take another look at uncertainty, tolerance, and risk. And of course, that's not just geotechnical uncertainty, but that flows through into site surveys and existing structures, and in fact, work in progress, which has uncertainty attached to it. So it's quite an exciting set of developments. And I think particularly for contractors and clients, to say that there is one vision, one representation of both the building and infrastructure world is, I mean, I can remember hearing 10 years ago, the construction company saying that they would engage with IFC when we could do both building and infrastructure. So now is the time. That development, we would like to see the UK engage with that development. And so we have the Infra project proposal, which would like to bring together the best practice for a common UK and Ireland asset information requirements for infrastructure. reach out to HS2 and the different lots that are being developed there, but also Highways England and Network Rail and TfL, and bring together that best practice so that the industry can share and learn and benefit from the consistencies. We can see the advantages in HS2 of the size of the project and the resources, and it would be really good if some of those lessons could be abstracted or and made accessible to those not quite so big infrastructure projects. So we'd like to get the support of the UK BIM Alliance and CDBB and the infra clients and the collaboration of the BIM4 groups to actually have a common library of best practice, of standards, of property sets and objects or whatever it happens to be, and socialize that through probably not real meetings, but and so on. So I think the opportunity there is to build on what IFC 4.3 has given us, and say, how in the UK do we want to take best advantage of that kind of standardization that Peter's just really hit us very hard with, and so on. So, yep, Peter, you're immediately invited on board to this project, but we would obviously like as many of the major client and project teams to come forward and say that they are interested in that shared experience and getting it out there for the industry to use. So yes, we are recruiting as always, but I think the offering of IFC and UK best practice together is a really powerful suggestion, and I hope that David Owens and I can entice you to come forward and commit to a one year to 18-month project to really get the best experiences shared and available to all to use as soon as possible. So when you come to the questions, I hope you'll put your names in the chat and say that you're interested in contributing. And I think I'll leave it there. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Nick. A really helpful update. And again, as you'll be getting used to on these Assemble events, a call to action, a call for help or involvement or engagement, kind of similar to the airports, is if you are involved in the airport sector or anything to do with infrastructure, get in touch because we have activities going on right now to help you guys. We don't want to be in a position where something is changed and added to as an extension to the schema, and you say, well, we didn't know about this, we didn't have any input. We're asking for your input right now, and we're really open to doing that. On that note, we're over now to the rooms updates. The first of the rooms is going to be the construction room, so I'll hand over to Asa to give you a quick update on what's going on over there.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Asa Abukhair, and I'm a principal consultant at A-Site. And I've recently joined the buildingSMART UK and Ireland as a representative of the construction room. So what I will be doing today is basically I will be telling you a little bit about the work that we do in the construction room, but more importantly, I will be showing you how you can get involved and hopefully encourage you to get in touch with us as soon as possible. So first, let me start by just quickly introducing you to the construction room in general. So at the construction room, our focus is basically on optimizing the we do on site. So and that is obviously through the use of BIM and the application of open standards. So the idea here is basically to include all of the construction processes and to work on optimizing processes from the production and management of your construction models all the way through to your on-site activities like your health and safety and your quality, to the cost forecasting and budgeting, including the procurement aspects and the takeoffs. So kind of like briefly on touching on what Peter mentioned in his presentation before, there were a lot of exciting work that's been done there. So this is what we are focusing on mainly around the construction room here. Now, why do we do this? We do this for three main reasons. And the first one is, in my view, is the important one at the moment, because as we all know, the productivity in construction is lacking behind all other industries, especially in the UK. So we work on ensuring that these standards, open standards that we're implementing, will facilitate the better collaboration and the coordination on site, reducing the risk and also reducing the rework, which will eventually help us produce better quality work and also improve the site productivity. Help us achieve lower costs. So we want to make sure that whatever we're doing on site is being done with the least amount of investment or the cost. And that's not just during the delivery stage or during the construction stage or the CapEx stage, but also to impact the OpEx stage, or to ensure that the operational costs are maintained as low as possible. And we also want to ensure that everything we do is to reduce health and safety incidents or injuries, but also improve the way we manage our health and safety records and quality records on site. So we achieve this so through, first we want to improve the digitization of all our construction work. So this goes way beyond the production and management of the really include elements. I'm not just talking about the information side, but also the processes side, which include, as I said, the planning, the cost control, the budgeting and forecasting. We also look at quality records and quantity takeoffs and workforce management and so on. So the work is mainly focused around optimizing all of these processes and information exchange as well. We also want to develop the site best practices based on open BIM standards. So we want to ensure that every process that we work on site is aligned with those standards. Support the flow of information between the different parties involved in a construction site. So that not only includes the flow of models. Again, I want also focus on the flow of properties, the flow of structured and unstructured data. We also want to ensure that the processes of change management and software implementation, perhaps, and also verification processes are all aligned with these open standards. Then lastly, we want to also promote these best practices in the industry. So we want to make sure that everyone involved in familiar with these practices, and they have a reliable source of information for the open standards, and that's either through the bSUKI professional certification. So if you are interested in kind of gaining that knowledge through certification with bSUKI, please get in touch. But we also have our regular webinars and seminars and summits, and also the engagement with the universities and educational bodies. So we are spreading that knowledge across the industry. And the last thing we want to do is we want to keep an eye on what's new in the technology, in construction technology in specific, and to ensure that our open standards are aligned with these new technologies. So a software provider or even just a construction worker who is interested in new technology, we want to hear from you. We want to listen to your challenges, to your concerns. We want to hopefully align our standards to help you achieve what you're aiming to do. So how do we plan to do this? We plan to do it through small steps and projects, and our projects are spread across multiple areas, mainly as you can see around the construction processes and the digitization and the automation sides. So 4D and 5D, for example, as Peter demonstrated in his presentation, is one of the key things that we are aiming at optimization in the works that we do, but that's not all. Obviously, we are hopefully looking at other technologies and other software to ensure that our processes are always adhere to the best practice. So the question now is basically how can you get involved? I want to hear from you. So as I said, whether you are involved in technology side and software side, or even as a construction worker, please get in touch. We want to hear from you. We want to know what.
Or just have a check to see whether you can see the. What's the handy one? No.
Hello.
Okay, Asa, are you done now? I think we were interrupted by someone on the line there.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so that's all from me. If you are interested in getting in touch, please do so. We've got the email address on the screen, and we've got my social media accounts as well. And I will be handing back to Casey for the next one.
Excellent, thanks, Asa. I think now we have Martin to give us a run through on what's happening in the building room.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks a lot everybody. So yeah, I'm responsible for the buildings room along with Emma Hooper. I just want to give everybody a quick run through of what we're involved in the buildings room. And pretty much it's what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
We're involved in buildings. So buildings across. Hey, John, I think your mic's on. We're picking up some feedback from you there, mate. Hi. Okay. Yeah. So the buildings room, we're involved in buildings. So pretty much anything that is building and built environment. So homes, schools, hospitals, offices, museums, justice, buildings, you name it. We're interested in them. And we're also interested across the whole life cycle, from feasibility, and there's going to be links with other rooms, of course, throughout the life cycle of a building. So, for example, planning would be liaising with the regulations room. Design, we're very much interested in the interaction between simulation and geometric simulation, technical simulation related to buildings. When we get onto construction, you've just heard from the construction room, and again, would be liaising with regulations room again for planning, and then for onto the asset management and the maintenance of buildings afterwards. So just quickly going to talk about how we're very much community focused rooms, and this is where really the call to arms to people listening to this presentation is to please get involved with us, either directly or via the BIM4 groups as part of UK BIM Alliance, the community groups, which will have an interaction with buildings. There's obviously a number of those community groups that have interaction with buildings, and also the affiliates program as well. For example, some of the institutions will be again focused on buildings, and we're really interested in growing this group, this dynamic group, who are really interested in pushing open BIM with relation to buildings across the life cycle. So quickly just run through a couple of the projects that we've got on in the buildings room, and you can see that these again range across the life cycle of the buildings. So MVD, for those who are not aware, stands for model view definition. It's basically a subset of the whole IFC, which is involves, for example, this one, quantity takeoff. And we saw that great presentation earlier of how cost 5D modeling is so important to buildings and all projects. So this is quantity takeoff assessment, a project around that. There's a project around energy simulation and how we can transfer information from IFC, from geometry towards technical simulation. looking at the IDM, which is Information Delivery Manual. That's a human readable format of how people can put together the specifications and the requirements for the models. The LOD question, trying to grapple with the LOD, LOI level of information need with regard to OpenBIM. There's two projects which cross over with the construction phase, and that's IFC for precast and IFC for rebar. Both projects involved in looking at interaction between precast concrete and steel reinforcement. And then we're also involved in IFC for site, landscape, urban planning to look at those areas that interface with buildings, and then design for manufacturing assembly, lean construction, and this IDM configurator, again, linking this human readable information delivery manual and the model view definition. And then moving forward in the future, we've got a project on the horizon, which is COBie 2.5. This was submitted in July with the idea of replacing the handover view and COBie 2.4. Basically, an attempt was to make COBie as lean as possible and fixing the minor issues which are in COBie 2.4, and also moving away from the express-based schema to a unified modeling language, which is going to be compatible with the IFC updates to the IFC schema, which I'll touch on a bit later on in the project for the technical room. There is a link to a video here. I'm not going to play it here, but the link's in the presentation if you want to go on, and that's a link to Bill East, who created, was heavily involved in the creation of COBie, talking about what his views and what his desire is for COBie 2.5. Again, with all of these, please get in touch with us through the bSUKI at ukbimalliance.org, and look forward to hearing from you soon and collaborating with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. We can now have a quick changeover to James, hopefully, who can give us an update on the product room. Are you there, James?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you see my screen?
We can see your emails, yeah.
Oh, one second. It always shares on the screen that your presentation is on. How about that?
Ready to go, yeah.
Oh, one sec. Can you see my full screen, or is it just my slide presentation?
No, just PowerPoint, not full screen yet.
Typically, it coming up on the wrong screen. Oh, come on.
We can do it on this screen if you want to run through it, but like.
Yeah, we'll have to do it this way. Okay, so hi everyone. My name's James Blood. I'm the lead coordinator for the product room. I'm a BIM manager for SGP Architects, and I've been a business manager for buildingSMART UK and Ireland chapter since about June. So I'm here, as you've already guessed, to kind of give you a brief overview or a high-level overview of what the product room is doing. So hopefully we can answer the following kind of simple questions as we go through this. So in the product room is obviously, as the name suggests, it's all about construction products and the data that needs to travel with those physical assets as they go through the CapEx and OpEx project delivery phase. And, you know, essentially robust sharing of consistent kind of product data. It's essential kind of to underpin digital transformation in the construction industry and enable things like the golden thread, which are coming out as a result of the Hackett review. So what's the purpose of the product room? So it's really around developing all the necessary things to enable, as I said, that robust and efficient use of product data for all stakeholders. And it covers things like classification systems, third-party standards, and other forms of kind of structured data that needs to sit within the open BIM arena. So kind of key objectives for the room, it's to develop tools and templates to support the buildingSMART data dictionary. If people aren't aware what that is, it's an online service that hosts classifications, properties, their definitions, allowed values, units and translations. Essentially that service allows people to build up industry standard compliant data sets that are open and interoperable, which, you know, looking back at Peter's presentation, you can start to see the value that consistently standardized structured data can provide. You know, one input, many outputs, driving lots of value propositions. So another key objective is to enable that efficient use of that product data in projects, and more importantly, the subsequent kind of asset management of those facilities. It's there to develop and execute projects, as Nick's described one of those projects, for that support and to advance the development of open BIM structures and methodologies for construction product manufacturers. And we're here to kind of facilitate the translation and localization of IFC. So that's allowing, you know, national domains to play together nicely in the international arena. So that's kind of what it is, what its objectives and what its purpose. So what is it up to at the moment? So they're currently working on shared terminology standards, libraries, tools and procedures. They're involved at the buildingSMART international level on internal activities there. They are working towards developing a standard for content and quality management of library data, which, again, as Peter highlighted earlier, is critical if you want to get those efficiencies and interoperabilities with the toolkit that you want to deploy on your project. So there's a working group currently working towards that. There's another working group for product data templates, which I personally been looking at PDTs for almost 10 years now. I was involved early with the BIM 4M2 movement. There was lots of initiatives both within the UK and internationally around defining PDTs. But obviously, if we're going to work both within the UK national domain and then broaden that out to the international, then the standards and the definitions of those PDTs and those properties that sit within them needs to be standardized at the international level, which has been happening, and I'll just detail some practical outcomes from that working group shortly. And then we've been looking at classification in models. Obviously, that's the common structure again, which underpins and enables that interoperability and exchange of representations, so we're all talking the same language and all on the same page. So, as I said, there's some really important developments from this product, from this working group. And if you're aware or not aware, there's two standards that have recently dropped, 23386 and 23387. 86 is primarily for defining a property and what constitutes a property and its attributes that need to travel with it. And then 387 is then taking that definition and then starting to assemble those into standardized product data templates, which then combined with the BSDD will start to enable that efficient and robust sharing between all the stakeholders of product data, which I'm sure we can all agree is critical to the digital transformation of the construction industry, and as I've said before, you know, to underpin things like the golden thread. So currently the room is in a preparation mode. So they're now sitting down to look at where we go next with the room, and we're looking for projects and initiatives to put forward. So as some of my colleagues have said before, you know, it's down to us as coordinators for the rooms in the UK to seek interested parties to get involved, and we're here to kind of coordinate those efforts. So we're in a perfect time to reach out and have some interesting discussions and look at some of the challenges that UK construction product manufacturers are facing and some of the needs that need to be provided for. So yeah, we need to start talking. There is an international summit at the end of October, which is free to attend. So any interested parties can sign up to that and attend and have a look inside the product room to see what's being discussed. But we'd love to hear from you so we can assist you. So the coordinators for the product room, myself and a lady called Patricia Massey. So please, if there are any UK construction product manufacturers out there or anyone that's involved in digital transformation on behalf of UK construction product manufacturers, then please do get in touch via myself or Trish, or you can contact us as we've previously highlighted through the bSUKI at ukbimmalliance.org email address, or you can contact me and Trish via Twitter. So please do, if there's any interest, you've got any questions, or like I say, you're involved as a construction product manufacturer looking to engage in digital transformation, or you're working on behalf of one of those entities, then please do reach out to us. We'd love to chat. And if you want any further information on the product room, then you can follow that link at the bottom of that slide, and it will give you a bit more detail and some more information. And that's me. Thanks.
Thank you, James. A nice quick update. Managed to steal a bit of my thunder there by mentioning the buildingSMART International Conference at the end of October.
Sorry.
Please do join in, sign up. It's one of those opportunities because of the situation we're in with the pandemic, where it's gone virtual. It's a free to attend event. So please sign up and just get to see what's being discussed at what levels, in what rooms, and what sectors. There's bound to be something there for you. Going to hand over now to Marek for a bit more of an update on infrastructure and rail routes. Over to you, Marek.
Thanks, Casey. I presume you can see my screen?
We can, yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm just going to follow on a little bit for what Nick presented earlier. So my name is Marek Sochocki. I currently work for Autodesk and I've been there for over 10 years. I think other than Nick, I'm probably the longest standing participant in the UK chapter of buildingSMART, and previous to that, the International Alliance for Interoperability, going past 2 decades now, which is quite a stint. And infrastructure is very close to my heart because I'm a fellow of the Institution of Civil Engineers and often feel it's been a little bit neglected in the world of IFC. But I'm pleased to say that for the last few years, there's been a lot of investment made by the community, and it's really being run through what we call the Infra Room. So the Infra Room was established about 5 or 6 years ago, and we concentrated first on preparing an alignment, IFC 4.1. So when people talk about IFC 4.1, it literally is a string line, it's an alignment, and it is designed there really to allow a coordination reference for fixed assets, so maybe street furniture on a road, a bridge deck, which must follow the path of a road, a rail, a pipeline. And as that road, rail, or pipeline moves, then obviously those fixed assets will themselves have to move accordingly. At the moment, it's actually quite a difficult thing to do because certainly fixed asset modeling applications don't really have the concept of an alignment. But what we've got is the IFC 4.1 alignment was published in 2015. My company supported that schema within one of its products, Civil 3D, straight away. Unfortunately, it's not really been supported too well by modeling because it just is a kind of a string unto itself. About the same time, we commenced what was called the IFC Bridge project, and that was a community effort as well that has led to the publication of IFC 4.2 just over a year ago as a standard. which included some building element updates as well. But very quickly we realized that the IFC 4.2 bridge needed to be updated because we have an ongoing set of parallel projects. Road, tunnels so road has been going for about 4 years, ports and waterways for about 3. Nick is closely involved in ports and waterways and the tunnel project, and an ongoing update to the bridge project. So what that is leading to is, and in parallel, rail was being developed by the infra room, but the rail initiative was spun off into its own separate rail room, principally because there was some high investment from parties in the German-speaking countries, French-speaking countries, and most importantly from China, who had released an IFC candidate for rail in 2016. So the rail room is operating separate, but in cooperation with the infra room. And all of these are leading to a candidate IFC 4.3 standard that has been released, which has what we call the infrastructure extensions. So these will be extra bridge, road project, ports and waterways, and the rail extensions. It doesn't include the tunnel extensions at the moment. And we are currently in what we call the extensions implementation pilot projects, and I'll come and speak a little bit more about those shortly. So we are at this point where we are testing the improved alignments, road features, ports and waterways features, and extended bridge features, as well as rail components. Once this testing is complete and this IFC 4.3 candidate is proven to be suitable, it will release the IFC 4.3 production standard, and that will be the one I would highly recommend anyone who's interested in IFC for infrastructure and rail to consider supporting. At the moment, these are not verified or certified standards, so they are, you would use them at high risk if you did try to implement them. But once the testing is completed and we can start supporting them in verified software, then IFC 4.3 should be a very valuable standard for those of us in the civil infrastructure world, because it will have a consistent schema for, as I say here, road, ports, bridge, rail, and of course additional extensions to buildings. All of this is also being done in parallel to an ongoing IFC 5 or whatever it might be called core schema project, and that's possibly due for release in 2022. And hopefully that will also incorporate any amendments, improvements, etc., to all of the above initiatives, and will in itself also include the tunnel project. That work is some way off, and it could actually have quite a dramatic change to how IFC is delivered to users. But safe to say, currently we are working on the IFC extensions and rail implementations project. So moving towards that, so for the IFC infrastructure extensions program, we actually have quite a large community of organizations involved. And I've kind of shown this in people who have got well-developed scenarios as opposed to those who are kind of interested, but just kind of not yet providing content. And there is no sort of fixed numbers here in terms of quality, but certainly the Nordic transport agencies are very active in specifying the desire for IFC for infrastructure. And similarly, there's been quite a few experts coming in from the US as well, particularly on bridge, because interestingly, the US has already made a request for bridge exchange by departments of transport using IFC. Initially, it was actually using the IFC 2x3 schema, but now moving towards the IFC bridge 4.3 version. And then there are others. We've had a presentation already from the Skanska Costain Strabag team, and Dave Owens from Costain has actually volunteered to get involved in some of the work as well, and Lawrence Lawrence Chapman from Network Rails also on this core, and he's willing to try and put forward some candidate Network Rails scenarios for testing. All of these scenarios require data to be provisioned, and so the organizations towards the left hand side, they've already provided some existing asset data. Particularly, I think, again, as I said, the Nordic agencies, they're going to volunteer some legacy bridge and road and drainage information. because that then needs to be effectively upgraded to the new IFC 4.3 schemas, because it may be in legacy IFC or land XML or another format stored in their asset records. And we're going to see about how we might transform that into the IFC 4.3 schema formats. So that's the work that's currently being piloted, and a number of software companies are involved. As I say, my company Autodesk, we've been involved in this work for over 5 years, and many others have also participated to a greater or lesser extent. And so this work, as I say, is going on, and this is, by the way, not an exhaustive list. There may well be others in there. Moving to the railway program. So from, again, the agencies engaged, there's still, again, a very strong Nordic representation there. And also at the bottom, you'll see China Rail BIM Consortium, who are one of the main funders and authors of the IFC rail definitions. There's also, as I said, a German language speaking community there with Austrian Rail and Swiss Rail. Deutsche Bahn were involved, but have actually withdrawn at the moment from this work, but there are still other German groups working on this. And examples of the type of things that are being piloted in the schema testing, for those of you who are engineers, you'll be able to determine what type of work this might entail. But so it relates to both the alignment, the track geometry rather, geotechnics, but then also furniture such as gantries and their placement as well. So a number of these scenarios are currently being released, and testing is in its very early stages. The testing is being done in consortium with, again, a number of software companies. And not only that, but then there are other agencies who are similarly participating and volunteering some of the scenarios as well. Just to mention TUM, which is the Technical University of Munich. We in Autodesk have been working very closely with them over the last few years, and they've been using some of our software to do tests and proof of concepts for rail as well as infrastructure. And really, in kind of conclusion, just one other comment is basically something that Nick mentioned earlier. So although the IFC 4.3 standards are being tested, it's been decided that the release candidate 1 that we are testing actually does need to be revised. The release candidate 2 is going to be presented to the rail expert panel later in October, just prior to the buildingSMART Virtual Summit that has just been mentioned. And the reason we've had to revise the schema is actually a positive release, because those software vendors such as my own organization have been testing and finding shortcomings in the schema as it stands, and there have been effectively experience from the production of the reference files that's proven it's not fit for purpose at the moment. Also, consultation with the IFC rail stakeholders said that there are extended needs, and Nick, I think, mentioned that the alignment definition was called out as being one of the problems, and this has a relationship to Kant, spirals, and also geometric referencing of point assets. So it's not a bad thing that it's been revised. It's actually a very positive thing, because it shows how the community has come together to improve the definition of the IFC 4x3 schema. Obviously, because these issues have been found in the rail project, they also have a consequent impact on the IFC infrastructure extensions program. So those pilot tests will themselves have to reflect any of the updates, particularly around the alignment, which is a shared definition between rail and the infrastructure side. That quick whistle-stop tour hopefully has given you enough info on what's happening currently in IFC infrastructure and rail. Thank you.
Thank you, Marek. Before we, or whilst Nick hands over or takes over, probably worth pointing out that the obvious, I think that everyone's recognised in this Assemble event, there is a heavy influence on infrastructure related things. That's intentional, but also to bring everyone up to speed with where infrastructure is in terms of open BIM and in general in information management creation and all of those things. There is a huge focus. I think historically has been left behind a little bit. now it's very much catching up. There seems to be a lot more activity going on various different types of infrastructure compared to buildings. The buildings are by no means being left behind, as you can see from the product room, from the building room, and the technical and things that are going on already. But I think that's as a result of industry asking for it. So I can't really emphasize enough, if you ask for something, things will happen. It also, the discussion and the emphasis on infrastructure slips very nicely into the digital twin side of things, and particularly the UK's National Digital Twin Programme. And kind of linked to that is that we've had buildingSMART International have appointed my colleague at RHDHV, Bart Brink, to lead the buildingSMART Digital Twin Working Group. Now, Bart and I work very closely with CDBB, so again, these things are very well connected. But just so that everyone knows that in the spirit of openness, these things are being discussed in coordination with one another, and how better do we make a national digital twin work than with open data standards of various different kinds. So kind of on a different tack now, moving away from infrastructure, and hand back over to Nick for a discussion about the regulatory room. So to you, Nick.
Okay. Just to reiterate that the role of the rooms is to lead a discussion which may lead to proposals for standards. To just summarize what the international regulatory room has been up to, we've been trying for a number of years to advance on all fronts, that's strategic, commercial and technology fronts. And so there are a number of reports that are available from the buildingSMART international website, including a look at the business case for automation, and a technical report or two technical reports, one on rule interoperability. If we can have interoperability for buildings and bridges, why can't we have interoperability for regulations? And those resources are all there. And we've also been developing our roadmap and our messaging. So what are we working on at the moment? We've got an awareness survey going on. Some of you will have received a questionnaire about attitudes to the interaction between BIM and the regulatory community. Our scope goes a little bit beyond regulation to requirements, project requirements, client requirements. The technical room deals with information requirements, but what I like to call real requirements is in our scope. So what we're focusing on at the moment is some definitions of use cases, looking at early stage concept approvals, technical approvals, construction approvals, and in-use approvals, which are increasingly important, and looking to implement the new MVD for a minimum set of information to support applications, regulatory applications and so on. So that all these are, we're trying to advance, as I say, on all fronts. In the UK, it's been a bit of a mixed story. At a strategic level, looking on the right, we had a BIM for Regs group led by Peter Kavelhorn, and that's faded away, but it led to a BIM for Health and Safety group, and that has actually thrived and prospered. With the support of the Health and Safety Executive and led by Gordon Crick. And that led to the promotion of a set of ideas. So they're now working on project information requirements for health and safety. And there's also three major projects underway at the moment. Two of them are called DCOM, which is a bit confusing. But there's an Innovate UK project that is looking at the commercialization of digital compliance, and there is a DCOM project sponsored by the Construction Innovation Hub, led by Tom Beach at Cardiff. which is advancing some ideas that were published in the Digital Compliance Roadmap that came out of, well, it was sponsored by CDBB about 2 years ago now. And there's also a project going on at, led by the University of Manchester, on developing health and safety risk libraries and tools that will take things like risk registers and past knowledge and experience and turn it into an active tool to examine design before we commit to construction methods and before we commit to actual activity on site. So there's some really world-class activities going on in those. The interesting thing is that they, yeah, I would say that they are all building on the initial DCOM research network, which is still active, on the development of 1192 Part 6 on health and safety and BIM, and some a previous innovation project called Regulatory BIM, Reg BIM. So I think for perhaps the first time, the UK is edging into being in a world-class position on the question of bringing the regulatory community and the design, construction and operate community together under the digitization banner. So I think although the actual BuildingSMART UK&I regulatory room hasn't had a formal existence for some years, it worked effectively. It was the BIM for Regs group. I think there's every reason to come together and look at how open standards can be absolutely central to what the next generation of regulatory arrangements and so on looks like, and how we ensure that that the client requirements are also properly represented in the digitization process. I don't, we haven't got in the construction industry, we haven't got very close to V-shaped engineering with requirements cascading down one side of the V and solutions accumulating up the other. And I think that's a reasonable objective in the next 4 or 5 years, built on open standards and shareable information and shareable regulations. So if that's an area where you'd like to be involved, then do step forward and we can actually start to evidence the case for open standards in this area. Thanks.
Thank you again, Nick. Right, okay, one last update. We're going to hand back over to Martin for a quick update on the technical room. Are you there, Martin?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so okay, so yeah, this is the technical room. Brief run through from technical room. Again, this is led by John Egan from BIM Launcher with me in a supporting capacity. Okay, so what you've heard from the other rooms so far is very much they are community focused rooms. Airports, although we haven't got an airports room yet, railways, buildings, infrastructure, construction, products and regulatory, they're all very much reaching out into the community to find use cases and projects that reflect the way people need open data and open BIM to work in the community. The technical room sort of sits underneath all of those rooms and interfaces more with the technical standards. And you can see that from the sort of projects that we have in the technical room. which are pretty much around the ongoing maintenance and enhancement of the standards and associated tools. The support group, which promotes the use of standards. The model support group. The software certification group, which is an important factor link. If you think about the implementation of OpenBIM actually gets implemented in softwares that we use on a day-to-day basis, we then need to make sure that those implementations in softwares are being carried out correctly, and that's done through the software certification group. There's IFC Doc, which is developed to improve the way that specifications are used to develop these model view definitions, again, which are subsets of the whole IFC. There's a linked data working group, which is looking at things like ontology, web language, how we can actually share information between servers and use linked data and project. The digital twins has already been mentioned already. Then we've got this IDM toolkit, information delivery manual, which is a human readable. So how do we interface human readable requirements with machine readable requirements, which the IFC is based on, and the development of this MVD Lite, which is a lightweight language to help lower the threshold need to develop these specific subsets of the IFC, the model view definitions. Now, all of these are going on in the current implementation of IFC, which is IFC 2.4. There's also a roadmap, and again, I've put some links to videos on the buildingSMART website. There's a PDF which you can download and a link to a video which talks about this roadmap, and that's actually looking at how do we take IFC forward in the future, and that's this development of what we call IFC 5. That's very much around trying to take the existing technology that IFC 2.4, IFC 4 is based on, and move it into some of the evolving technologies that are out there at the moment, particularly around JSON and unified modeling language. And you can see these. This is an interesting graphic that I took from this threshold, moving these existing products to the right, where they become much more generic and much more accessible to the current technology. A very, very quick run through on a future project that's just about going through pre-development phase on OpenCDE. And this is this idea of how do we get CDEs, common data environments, to actually talk to each other. There's been a sort of a start of this with this BIM collaboration format, but there's been issues with that. So we've now developed this server-to-server technology based on both implementing property exchanges between attributes within different CDEs, and also this Open Doc API, which allows the exchange of documents. So the first two phases of these have been implemented. One of them allows you to, say, select a file from Aconex and open it in Solibri, and another one automatically exchanges documents from a published status client CDE to a construction CDE. So how do we link all of these CDEs together? And this is something that is led by John Egan from BIM Launcher. So the Twitter handle of John is there. With all the other things, I'm running out of time, hence the rush. Please contact us at bSUKI at ukbimalliance.org, and we'd love to have you involved in any of these projects, and also any ideas and any contribution to the future of IFC would be gratefully received. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Martin. We are rapidly running out of time. I am going to, however, hand over to Emma for a final few words.
Hi everyone. You'll be glad to know there's no quiz this time around. So we haven't got much time left. So I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who's attended today. Sadly, we've run out of time to answer any questions, but if you do have any questions, please get in contact via the several channels, and we will reply back. I just wanted to give a brief summary of in terms of Peter's presentation. I thought it was really particularly good in terms of him showing how they've used a consistent data structure as a base for all the technology to then to plug into. So they're using a consistent language throughout, and you know that's the beauty of what the IFC sort of data architecture provides. And also, like Casey said, we've really tried hard to focus it more on the infrastructure side, because obviously in the past there's been quite a lot of bias towards buildings. So we really want to show how open data, open BIM can be applied to the infrastructure world. So we've only got a few minutes left. In terms of the next event, that will be, I think that's planned for December. And as mentioned earlier, there is also the event that bSUKI International are hosting in next month in October. So please go and sign up for those presentations. They did one in spring and it was very good actually, probably one of the best online events that we've had in lockdown. So I definitely would recommend that. So with that, I will sign off and hopefully see you again in December. So thanks for joining us and bye.